Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Lucas Oil, TireRack.com, and RockAuto.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb, and welcome everyone to MotorWeek podcast number 286. I am John Davis. We've got a full load today. We've got two vehicles we're going to talk about, lightning round, viewer question. But along with me in the studio today with Greg Carlos and Jessica Ray from our MotorWeek staff is our special guest, our online auto parts expert, Tom Taylor. Tom, it's been quite a while since you've been on, too long. Welcome to our podcast.
Yeah, thanks, John. This will be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
And we're going to start right off with something I know that's one of your huge concerns. I remember back in the days, and this goes back 10, 20 years, when we used to do some of the high school automotive technician competitions. I think may still be sponsored by AAA. They would always talk about this enormous deficit in the number of automotive technicians that were in training, and they would throw out the number like 50,000. And I would imagine that this has a big impact on the auto parts business, just not enough trained folks. What's the situation today, and are you optimistic or pessimistic?
The situation is what you described, and it's been hard to find employees for any job lately for a number of reasons. So that certainly hasn't helped automotive technicians, and owners of older vehicles, if it's hard to find people to service your car, then you're in a bind and more likely to give up on your old vehicle and get a loan to get a new vehicle, which is a waste. I was recently encouraged. About once a year, I go to the Florida Panhandle to a community college down there called Chipola Community College. They have a bunch of technical programs and visit their automotive training section. And a few months ago, I went, and they actually all their classes were full. They had waiting lists.
Wow.
It was a huge turnaround, and it just seemed to be Florida's had a lot of publicity lately for, hey, these are great careers, well paid, honorable, challenging, all sorts of technology involved, and that's what I give credit for. I can't think of anything else. It really seems to have worked. So if in high schools and if local and various governments, hey, these are, you don't just have to go to a college and get some degree and then figure out what your career is. Start out in a trade, and it can be really rewarding and fulfilling and well-paying and everything you need.
You know, people, I think, still think of auto repair as, grease under the fingernails. And while that's probably still correct in some instances, you've really almost got to be a computer expert in order to diagnose any kind of modern vehicle. And I remember Pat Goss talking years ago about how the good technicians at his shop could easily pull down a six-figure salary. So it's quite different than even a decade ago.
Yeah, and I was helping my daughter, who's a teenager, replace the spark plugs in a 12-year-old SUV, which has a transverse V6, so the one bank of cylinders is up against the firewall. And
yep.
I thought it'd be a bigger job, but the vehicles are the connectors are better, the fasteners are better, and we had to disassemble take off the upper intake manifold and do a bunch of things, but everything came apart easily and went together easily. And I was really encouraged after we finished that she said this is like working with Legos. And that's I think that's really a positive thing to say, because it's like Legos are precise and well made, and you're not snapping off little bits of plastic, and your hands aren't all greasy. And so, yeah, I was really encouraged by that.
Well, speaking of parts, and I know during the pandemic, with more and more people, quote unquote, working from home, I have a lot of friends that got more into some of your do-it-yourself car repair than they had done in the past. And I noticed that one of the topics that you had mentioned that you might want to talk about today was not always, when you're trying to replace something on your vehicle, not necessarily going by the part that's on the car when you go to replace it. In other words, is it true that the part on the car may not be the right one? That's, someone may have put the wrong part on. I guess that's kind of your point, right?
Right. Yeah. Usually, the part that's on there is correct, and you can look at the photo and say, oh, okay, this matches that. But it's always good to be a little bit cautious and maybe double check with especially some parts. Like the first parts I personally encountered was air filter. I got a 71 Ford, and it was really well maintained, except the air filter looked real nasty. I'm like, why didn't the previous owner replace the air filter? And then I discovered, well, the 1971 air filter doesn't fit this car. And so I looked at the part number on it. On rockauto.com has a part number search tools. So I looked at the aftermarket air filter, the old one. I looked up that part number, and it turns out, well, okay, that part number only fits 1972 and newer Fords. So sometime over the years, the air cleaner housing had been changed on this engine.
Oh, I got it.
And then more recently, I think it was a 2007 Chevy pickup truck that the brakes were real weak, and nobody could figure out why. So took the calipers off, and the brake pads were only contacting the rotor on one side. There was this perfect right angle worn in the brake pad as the brake pad bent around the two small brake rotors. So somebody had installed this truck had the police package that with the larger rotors, and somebody had installed the smaller rotors with the calipers and pads for the larger rotors, so they didn't match. So yeah, that would be a case of, like, rockauto.com has info pages for the parts. You can see the diameter that the rotor's supposed to be, see if the rotor that's already on the car matches what's supposed to be on the car with the police package or the heavy duty package, and make sure you're not duplicating an error somebody made years ago.
I hate to say it, but I think once some years ago, I used to have a rather large box in my garage filled with parts that didn't fit. I think I got rid of them at a garage sale. Here at the show, it's interesting. I got asked, we're getting a lot of, I would say, pushback from the audience that have gasoline-powered vehicles that we're doing too many EVs. And I try to explain to them when we get a note or an email or a comment, we test what's new. And right now, almost 1 out of 2 new vehicles that we get into the show are electrified. Either they're plug-in hybrids, or more times than not recently, pure EVs. And I'm wondering, from your standpoint, 2 things. Does that mean going forward that we're going to have a harder or better time getting parts for gasoline-powered vehicles? Do you think that gas cars are going to keep changing as rapidly as they've done over the last few decades? I mean, what's your outlook when it comes to maintaining a gas-powered vehicle in this new EV age?
Yeah, I think it might actually be going into a golden age for people who want to keep their cars longer and have it be affordable to repair the vehicles, because there'll be gasoline-powered new ones made for at least the next 20 years. Mm-hmm. And if the auto manufacturers have actually laid off their engineers who came up with changes for internal combustion engines and have put all the resources in electrical, then they won't be changing these vehicles. So recently there's been a lot of little changes, like the stop-start technology. Your engine turns off every time you come to a stoplight to eke out the last little bit of gas mileage, and those don't necessarily add to the durability or the ease of working on the vehicle. But little changes like that will stop. If the cars stay pretty much the same over the next 20 years, then there'll be replacement parts will be readily available. Prices will drop if everybody's been making the same parts forever. So I think it might be more like back in the glory days of the 60s when Chrysler had 3 engines and everybody remembers how durable the Chrysler Slant 6 was. Well, that's because they didn't change it for decades, and if there were problems, they fixed them. And so we might be it might be a good time to get a gasoline car and hang on to it.
I look at the move to stop internal combustion engine sales, particularly in California and a lot of other states, by 2035. I'm not going to get into whether I like the idea or not. I think I don't. But anyway, it seems to me that if that comes to pass, a lot of people will probably be hanging on to their old internal combustion engine vehicles longer, especially ones capable of long-distance travel, at least until electric vehicles become more mature. If somebody's thinking about doing that, should they worry about parts being available, or at least parts that they need?
No, I don't think so. There'll be other people doing that'll be hanging on to their gas-powered cars. So if there's demand and the cars are still on the road, there'll be parts available.
Yeah, I can imagine now with V8s going away that a lot of people will be standing in line for some of the last V8s, either from the Dodge folks or the new Mustang, since it's still going to have a V8. Anything with a V8 may be worth quite a bit of money 10 years from now.
You might see some people combing through the junkyards trying to find the engine bodies so they can. It'll be an interesting time, that's for sure.
I was
the holy grail for the electric cars is be able to duplicate the V8 sound. If anybody comes up with a way to do it that isn't real hokey, doing it over the stereo speakers or something.
Well, I guess that's what Dodge is going to do with their, or at least they say their
I've heard
concept.
It. Have you heard it?
No, I haven't. I heard it online. Yes, I did.
Well, yeah, we haven't heard it. I haven't heard it in person,
no.
but I mean, it sounds really good online. So I think they're trying. They're at least
artificial. Anyway, well, thanks, Tom. We'd like you to stick around for the entire podcast, and feel free to make any comments about any of the other stuff we're going to talk about. We're going to move on to, it's interesting we're talking about gas-powered vehicles, because normally on these podcasts, at least one of the 2 or 3 vehicles we talk about has got a battery in it, but not the 2 we're going to talk about today, which is good. The first one is the Honda CR-V, easily the benchmark in compact utilities. Jessica, why don't you take the lead on this? It's all new, and this is an enormously important vehicle, not only for Honda, but for all of its competitors.
Yes. I mean, it's one of the benchmarks in the class. I wouldn't say that this doesn't have a battery, because it will have a model with a battery.
With the hybrid.
The hybrid, which is coming after the typical internal combustion engine model, but so I really won't talk much about that because I only got to see it. I did not get to drive that, but we will drive that soon. But basically, I mean, it's a pretty significant look difference with this new CR-V. I think they took a look at how successful the RAV4 has been, that new RAV4. They got rid of all of the rounded edges of it and
made it look mean.
Yes, exactly. They made it look mean. Mm-hmm. And I think most people, if you looked at them side by side, a 2020 model of them, you would be like, the RAV4 looks better. So now the CR-V has caught up to that, and it looks fantastic. The hood is just a little bit longer. It's all a little bit more angular, and like you said, kind of like mean and angry. Yeah. Which is kind of the look that all cars seem to be going by these days. So the looks are just, it really is fantastic. But then also inside is gorgeous because it's not much different than what we've seen in the Civic, the new Civic and the new
It shares that platform.
Yes, and so they shared that interior. But it's very, elegant inside.
It's almost, and what got me is the linearity of the lower part of the instrument panel. if you weren't around, of course, but back in the so-called golden age of the first golden age of automobiles, back what Tom was talking about in the 60s, almost every car had this instrument panel that below the top pad was very linear across. And when I look at the Civic and I look at the CR-V, I see that little bit of nostalgia coming back. And even some of the rotary controls, even though they're kind of not exactly what you think they are, it's interesting. It's a different look.
It is, and I like it a lot. I think that it also is one of those things where, you know, it's updated compared to the last generation, but it isn't too modern. It's modern, but it's not too modern. You still have knobs for climate controls, and that is a very, very important thing for the people who are buying this vehicle. So, the inside is it's really nice. I will say probably one of the biggest things you have to note about this new CR-V is that at least at launch, and maybe this could change in the future, there's currently, they have axed the LX base model. That is gone.
I wonder why. It must not have been popular.
Well, I guess not. But what that also means is that now the CR-V starts at the EX model,
which is more expensive.
Which means that it now starts over $30,000.
So I wonder if that's to drive people down to the HRV. Yeah. Any comment about the CR-V, Greg?
Yeah, I'm digging the Civics, like the stylings. We saw it really originate there, and now they're coming from the Civic and moving out. I noticed they have this, what we've all kind of griped about for years is they have the center infotainment screen kind of propped up right on top of the dash. I'd personally like to see that a little better integrated at this point. It seems like everybody was doing it, and then now they're starting to realize, like, all right, well, let's integrate it into the gauges or maybe put it down a little bit further. This is kind of sticking with the whole, let's just slap it on top. And I think we had it in the Integra too. While there are buttons and knobs on it, I remember in the Integra, I didn't love the feel of them.
Right.
I'd hope they.
It is. I forgot. It's also the same in the Integra.
Yeah. But it does look good. Looking at it from a whole across the dash standpoint. I can't say a CR-V really excites me. Even at my current life stage with kids at the moment.
You are like their target. One of
it's not really hitting me anywhere in the fields. So, but they'll sell a ton of them.
On the practicality aspect, it's a little bit bigger inside.
It's very slightly. You get a little bit more rear leg room.
It's like that incremental improvement that Honda does with almost every redesign.
Like the cargo capacity was already best in the class already, so that's been great. The rear seats also recline a little bit more for your rear passengers who might want to relax a little bit. And I mean, I drove it, and it's got that same engine that's in the Civic. It has, I think, an ample amount of power. It did say they have tweaked the CVT a little bit. It was still a little, it's a CVT, so it's still a little bit buzzy. But, if it got where it needed to go. And in a world where we drive really, really powerful cars all the time, like, it was refreshing to be like, all right, this is a car that's going to sell a lot of units. And
so it was refreshing to drive something slow.
A little bit slower. No, well, it's funny because I have a Jeep Wrangler, right? And like the engine is, it struggles. I'm under 200 horsepower, in that thing. And it makes me drive slower and safer because I don't, it's just a different driving experience. And that's not a bad thing. Like, it was very pleasant. It's exactly what you expect a CR-V to be. And it's just one of those things where it's, a high volume car like this, Honda knows exactly what they need to do to make it better and for it to appeal so they can sell 400,000 of them a year. Well, maybe not this year, but.
Tom, I don't know if you've got any comment about it, but I also had another question regarding something that's in the CR-V. But when you look at the trend on these car-based SUVs, do you think the CR-V or anything that's going on with the trend like right now is setting the stage for the future of these vehicles, or how do you view them, if at all?
Yeah, everything seems to be moving to a kind of a mid-size SUV, a super practical station wagon kind of model. That it reminds me of
heresy. That word, station wagon.
Sorry, you can edit that out.
But you're absolutely right. They all seem to be coming together in this so-called mid-size class. No matter what you compact, subcompact, mid-sized, full-size. I mean, they are converging.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's. I mean, they are practical vehicles, so you got room for cargo and passengers, and get decent gas mileage, and so it kind of makes sense.
Hey, I have a question about CVTs. One of the reasons they were touted early on was a lot fewer moving parts. Have you seen any particular issues with CVTs that maybe are something different than a normal transmission that might affect the parts business?
They have unique transmission fluids, so you have to make sure you get the correct transmission fluid. And the earliest ones, just overhearing the professional mechanics talking, there were some that were real problem prone. But it seems like after those initial hiccups that they're reliable and they have great shift feel, and I can't think of any reason to avoid them.
You just touched on something. I'm not going to let you go without talking about it. I went in recently to get a bottle of transmission fluid for some vehicle that we had in for testing that was a little low, and I was blown away by the number of varieties. So it really is. There is no longer a one or two transmission fluids out there. It seems like you've got to have either brand specific or at least country of origins specific when it comes to trans fluid.
Yeah, it goes across all the fluids, the motor oil and brake fluid and
antifreeze.
Antifreeze. Yep. Yeah, you don't have to necessarily the car manufacturers aren't making their own fluids, so you just got to watch that the fluid manufacturer says it meets the spec for your particular vehicle, because that aftermarket manufacturer is likely making the fluid that is in the new car also.
Yeah, it's. I noticed that. I believe it's the Asian and European vehicles both have a blue antifreeze now, but they're not the same.
Yeah, it really hurts for people that are colorblind like
me. or just not, paying attention, period. Okay, let's move on to our lightning round. And basically, these are topics that have come across our wire, and we're fascinated by them. But we kind of just want to get some groupthink on whether they are worth considering or not. Right now, everybody knows that one of the big hurdles for electric vehicles is the electric infrastructure. And while Tesla may have it figured out for their owners, the rest of us looking for a place to plug in, it can still be very confusing. So the folks at Electrify America, which have, if not the largest, one of the largest electrical charging networks in the country, they're finding, and I agree with them, that the different types of chargers at their locations can be incredibly confusing. So they have decided to take a page from the automotive industry and start naming different chargers differently. Their 150 kilowatt hour chargers are now going to be called ultra fast, and their 350 kilowatt per hour chargers are now called hyper fast. Do we think this clarifies the differences between the chargers, or is it just another marketing whatever? All right. I can see from the skepticism around the table here, I have an idea what the answers are. Go ahead.
I like the direction they're going because it is a little confusing. I don't love the execution, specifically with the Ultra and Hyper, because who's to say what's faster than, is Ultra better? I might make the argument.
Is Ultra faster than Hyper?
Right. I might make the argument that Ultra is better than Hyper.
But,
you know
and what's faster than Hyper? which is like the future of charging, right? Like
Right.
there's going to be something past.
And then we
what do we
currently
call it?
have the debate of what's a supercar and what's a hypercar.
Right.
So now it's like we're bringing it into the Chargers. I don't know why you
Super
can't
fast.
just either use numbers or just say fast, faster, fastest. Like I think everybody understands that. Fast, faster, fastest.
I
So,
think they're the same like color too. Like if they would have made them different colors, right? Like because if you look at like where they, I don't know how it's like pronounced. I just call it the Chad. A Chadamo.
Chatamo,
Chatamo.
right,
I just call it like the Chad. That one doesn't get a name. Also,
Right.
you can just keep calling
sounds
it
like
Chad.
a sandwich.
Yeah.
Like a really bland sandwich.
Do you know a lot of gasoline used to be at the pump? They would have different colors to signify regular, mid-grade, and premium.
makes
That's
They
pretty
still
much
do.
gone away.
Nah,
You
some
still
of
see
them
it?
do, yeah.
Yeah, well, actually, they do. It'll be yes, they still do that at a gas pump.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm like, yeah, make it a different color because then you can be like, especially too, because you don't know until you walk up to it that if it's a 150 or 350, it's not super easy to like.
No.
You gotta wait till you pull into the spot and then you're like,
And read it.
Since we all use emojis for everything anyway, why not just have like a turtle, a bunny, and then like a rabbit with its hair on fire or something?
Yeah.
I don't know, like something. Again, I like where they're going. I just don't think the execution was just right. Maybe they should have.
I think they're kind of wrong focusing on the. It's like if you went into a gas station and I drive my wife's '93 Ford Tempo in, and it's always hard to pump gas into it, and the attendant's there and he says, "I got this new hose that pumps 10 gallons a minute." And it's really great. And I call it hyper super duper gold platinum fast. Well, if I put that on try to pump gas in my Ford Tempo, it still won't accept gas at that speed,
Right.
and I potentially could damage my Tempo as I blow gas all over the back of it and fill my socks with gas. So it seems like more would be useful to be like, well, your particular vehicle can pump to 80% charge. It'll take this much time with this charger versus this is hyper fast, which may work with some car you don't own.
That's a really good point because right now there aren't that many vehicles out there that can use the 350 kilowatt per hour chargers.
Now we're getting into we should have bouncers at each one. Be like, nah, bro, you couldn't handle hyper fast. You get out of here.
This with all of the new government money that is going to be spent on installing chargers all over the place, maybe they ought to take a little bit and put it aside and try and figure out
How to brand it.
how to brand it and
Yeah.
how to market it better.
I wouldn't mind that so much at all.
I don't think I would either.
Because I feel like it's like every time you try to explain charging to somebody who knows nothing about EVs, it's so hard.
Yep, their eyes glaze
Exactly.
So hard.
over. We've got some work to do.
Yeah.
Let's move on to a question, and actually, I think this is a good one for you to chime in on, Tom. We have an email from Ron K. He says, "My 1990 Acura Integra," he's got a good one, "came with 14-inch wheels. Today, most cars come with 17-inch or 18-inch wheels or larger. Why are larger wheels more common? Is this more about style or performance?" What do you think, Tom?
Well, I think one big reason is style and performance are certainly important, but something else is just the metallurgy and the manufacturing techniques improved a lot to be able to make some of these wheels. To have it's like so much of the brake rotors exposed, and that just wasn't possible, 40 years ago. But it was a way to, if the cars are kind of look similar with the plastic bumper covers and are all little station wagons, then a way to set yourself apart is to have the really cool looking wheels. And I would say get wheels, get the larger diameter wheels if it is a performance vehicle, because it does help handling. But stick with the smaller size wheels if you have a vehicle that's not aimed at performance. You care more about ride. Mm-hmm. You have better durability if you have a bigger sidewall on your tire. You're less likely to damage a wheel in a pothole. So yeah, there's no easy answer. It's great that there's more options, and it can help both performance or everyday commuter vehicle.
Yeah, I mean,
Anyway.
to me, it seems like the style kind of came like larger wheels just became a fad, right? And so it just keeps getting bigger and
bigger.
Wheels
Oh,
and bigger.
22s now are becoming actually options.
And so I think it's like that's where it started, right? And then it was like, well, you have to sort of adjust for a lot of that. Things. The tires have to be made differently. I think like the sidewall, I believe, has to be stronger.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it was style first, right? And then I think everything else kind of came after.
Yeah, I mean, we just kept buying cars with bigger wheels. People were like, oh, I like that one more than the one with smaller wheels. So, And I also did a story on dub culture, and that kind of had played into it too, because even there was a time where manufacturers weren't offering these 18, 19, 20-inch wheels, but you could get them in the aftermarket. And then when they realized so many people were doing so, they're like, oh, well, people seem to like these. Let's start offering them factory and start making some money.
Yeah.
And that's where we are.
We've seen another byproduct of this going to the bigger wheels, which it may be less obvious if you're not testing cars like we do, and that's allowed the manufacturers to put larger brake rotors with more brake surface for stopping. And we've seen over the last 15 years, our average stopping distance continue to drop. Let's say 20 years ago, an average vehicle would take 130 to 140 feet to stop from 60. We're now down to 110, 115, and increasingly, just over 100 feet, which
especially
is especially with EVs, and that's despite all their extra weight.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So it's I used to think that bigger wheels would say, okay, you're ruining the ride. It's going to mean the tire and wheel combination can get damaged much easier, like Tom said, because of potholes and so forth. But if it makes you stop an extra car length or two shorter, I'm all for it.
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah. We've got one more vehicle we're going to talk about, and this is, I personally think, just a terrific piece of work from Toyota, and that's the 2023 Toyota GR Corolla. And I mean, it's an honest-to-goodness, high-performance Corolla, not a package for looks, but I think with everybody talking about EVs, and we're heading that way without any doubt, to see, the world's largest car company say, wait a minute, there's a lot of interest in life in internal combustion engine performance. And by the way, we're going to take it down to the really affordable level. Anybody else feel that way about the GR Corolla?
Yeah, I thought it was funny. Before getting into the drive, Motor Trend's headline, or at least their tweet, was like, "Toyota, is everything okay?" Because they're almost going through a midlife crisis type thing.
Are we really sure we want to do everything hybrid?
We were falling into this routine of them just putting out Camrys and RAV4s and standard Corollas, and we're just like, all right, this is who Toyota is now. Then they team up with Subaru a decade ago. They bring the FRS, now the 86. Then they team up with BMW under GR, and now the Gazoo Racing. Then they give us the Supra. And now this one, I think, pleases people more because it's all Toyota.
Yep.
They didn't
Good
go
point.
outside.
That's a very good point.
They took the GR Yaris, Gazoo Racing Yaris, which is available pretty much everywhere but the US.
Here.
And they said, all right, well, we're going to give you the GR Corolla. And that's where we are with a 1.6-liter 3-cylinder turbo and 300 horsepower. And if you're paying attention, that's 100 horsepower per cylinder.
Whoa.
And this is where everybody's like, Toyota, do you realize what you're doing? This isn't a top priority for you. You're not going to sell many of these things, which you guys are very concerned with selling a lot of vehicles. And I'm here for it, man. I went out to Utah, Park City, drove over to, and I'm forgetting the name of the racetrack outside of Salt Lake City, and they just turned us loose on it in this little hot hatch, which I, even knowing all the stats and everything going into it, I'm like, okay, is this a legit hot hatch? And basically by the third corner, I was like, okay, this is like a legit Golf R Civic type.
It's all-wheel drive too.
It is all-wheel drive, and not only that, So the default mode is 60-40 front rear torque. You can go full 50-50 at a quick flip of a dial, or you can go 30 front, 70 rear, which personally is my sweet spot, because and it's weird because they kind of consider that like a rally version, because this is like rally built.
Sounds like a rally car.
Right, and 50-50 they call is like their track, quote unquote, track mode. I didn't love how it felt on the track. I mean, yeah, you can kind of get on it early, and you can, if you play by the rules, you can be very fast in 50-50. But if you like to just have some fun, 30-70 is the way to go, because you can really get some rotation out there. I couldn't quite drift it around, partly because I'm, not out there trying to crash Toyota's car the first day I've ever driven it.
You'd like to leave them some tires left.
And also because you still do have that 30% to the front, so it's not like you're going full 100%. But yeah, man, it was just it is a really fun car on the racetrack. I unfortunately didn't get to drive it on the street. It was all a track event. I did get to drive it on like the outside ring, and I thought it was totally fine, just in like a normal driving setting. Didn't seem like it beat me up like the previous Civic Type R did. Sounds really good. It actually has 3 exhaust pipes, and the middle one is open when you start it, so you have like a nice, deep, cool hot hatch rumble. And then at 20 miles per hour, they say it closes, and then it opens back up at 4,500 RPM to prevent backflow and give you all kinds of cool sounds. And they don't produce any sounds. This is all coming from that 3-cylinder engine.
That's cool.
Sounds really nice. 6-speed manual transmission, as you'd expect from a hot hatch. And then sticking with the whole theme of threes, there are 3 levels. So you have the core, which is their base grade, which I think is a really solid deal. At $37,000, you pay another $1,100 to get a front limited slip and a rear limited slip, and you're coming under $40,000 for that with that performance pack. I think that's probably the best way to go, unless you really want like the exclusive. The middle exclusive now is going to be Circuit Edition, which is 1 year only. That has standard LSD front, LSD rear, some suede insert interior stuff. But then if you really want to go high end
in a Yaris.
High end in a Corolla is the Marizo edition, which is Akio Toyota's pseudonym that he races under. And that actually, in addition to all the cool hot hatch features like vented hood and a few other things, forged wheels, it actually gives you more torque. So you go from 273 pound-feet in the core in the Circuit Edition to then you go to the Marizo, which has 295 pound-feet of torque. Comes in a little bit later on the rev band, but it is a noticeable difference. When I hopped in that compared to the core, I'm like, okay, this is like a different car, because they also tweaked the suspension. They stiffened the front. They changed the spring rates. I was considerably faster in that car than I was in the core. Yeah. But it's like $50,000, and it'll probably end up being more once it gets to dealerships. Yeah. And it also doesn't have a rear seat. I don't think I mentioned that.
That's right.
The Marizo Edition does not have a rear seat.
So they pulled it out for weight.
Again, Toyota, like what is going on here? So practical, not exactly. Fun, very much so. But at the end of my first drive, I think I kind of brought that up. I originally had the question of, is it a hot hatch? That was answered very quickly. And then it became, is the Marizo worth the extra like 12 to 15 grand, whatever it is? And I can't say that it is unless you're super into exclusivity, because they're only sending 200 to the States. And if you don't, if you want the highest performing Corolla you can find, I won't fault anybody for going that way. But for me, I think for under $40,000, you can get a heck of a nice Corolla hot hatch,
especially compared to the competition.
When you're considering Golf R's over 40, it's solid, better than solid.
Tom, has anything about this surprised you, especially from somebody like Toyota?
I'm excited about it. You're talking about people keeping their V8s. I mean, these are cars to keep too. You just can't duplicate that fun hot hatch, and it's neat having the competition. It reminds me of the Mustang versus the Camaro endless debate. It's having the Civic Type R versus the Corolla. I like those rivalries.
Yeah, me too. It's kind of what makes it fun. Makes it fun to come to work in the morning.
Yeah, man.
Well, I think that just about wraps it up. We do have one more piece of business to cover, and that is to see if anybody has a rant or a rave, something that has stuck in your craw, as I think they used to say. Anybody, anything?
I have kind of an interesting rant that I kind of discovered very recently.
Yeah.
And it has to do with the B pillar.
The B pillar.
The B
My
pillar.
favorite pillar.
All right, that's the window pillar nearest your head.
Yes. And so I was driving the e-tron GT. And now, keep in mind, everyone, I am 5 feet tall. So I sit very close to the steering wheel, which means that the seat gets adjusted a lot closer.
Jessica's the one that when they get in the car, you cannot get in the car after her immediately.
Yes. But so I pushed the seat up, and this was really the first car that I really took notice that the B pillar and the large sports seats with, and everything, and the headrest, if I looked over my shoulder, I couldn't see anything.
Wow.
I could not see out of that.
You just saw a seat or a B pillar.
That's it. That's all I saw. I saw nothing. And I was like, man, that sucks. That sucked a lot, because that's a huge part of the driving experience I'm always
Being
looking
able
over
to see.
my shoulder.
Right.
Yes. It's like when you drive something like, I don't know, like a mid-sized pickup truck or something, and you have a difficult time seeing out the back. It was worse than that, because I literally could not see anything. So yeah,
It's like having blinders on.
basically, and it was just very disappointing, I think, because that's a 4-door car. That's not a sport coupe or anything. So it was just one of those moments where I was realized this car is not made for somebody like me.
I actually have a problem with more and more vehicles because of thickness of A pillars. For rollover standards. They for a while, they just seemed like they were getting crazy thick. I think plus they have airbags in them and
Yes.
everything else. And so when I see an automaker, and I have to say Honda is probably at the top of the list.
CRV actually has a significantly larger A pillar in this generation than the previous one.
And yet they still basically have managed, because they've always talked about visibility all the way around. It doesn't seem to bother me as much as some, but so sometimes I think they forget about people that aren't whatever normal size is, 5'9" or 5'8" or whatever.
Yeah, but that's my rant.
Greg, anything?
No, I'm pretty chill today. That was a
Tom,
good
anything
rant.
that you would like to get off your chest, or someone you'd like to praise or chastise?
Yeah, I got praise. It's like a change of heart with me. I've been kind of disappointed over the last 5 years or so with car reviews often focusing all this technology stuff on the dash. It's like how many USB ports and Apple CarPlay but I rented a Gia Sportage recently and had to put a bunch of miles on it, and I forced myself to push the Apple CarPlay button, and I was amazed how well it worked. I felt like a dummy for not pressing that button on other rent-a-cars, and it was like GPS worked great. I was listening to podcasts and without any effort.
Yeah, you're a convert. I think Apple said 90% of people looking for a new car will not get it if it does not have CarPlay.
It's hard to go back once you've been using it.
I find I use it on my phone for everything. And when I was just in a rental car. It was actually a Nissan Rogue not 2 weeks ago. I got in, it had a port, had Apple CarPlay. I plugged it in. I didn't mess with anything else in the infotainment system in the car. And I used it all off of that, which if I was an automaker, I'd be very alarmed about that. But that is just because it's the easiest thing you can do. You don't have to relearn anything.
And I think a lot of times, too, you are futzing with stuff way less.
Yeah.
You just plug it in. You have the controls for music on the steering wheel, and that's what you do. You put a playlist on, and that's it.
Yeah.
You don't touch it. And so I think less driver distraction. It reads you your text messages if there's something important. I think it's fantastic technology.
Yeah. Wave of the future. It's here. Tom, thank you very much. I want to thank Tom Taylor, our online auto parts expert. I hope you'll come back and join us again soon, Tom.
Yeah, I hope to. This is a lot of fun.
And our Over the Edge reporter, Greg Carlos, our digital producer, Jessica Ray, who is also the producer for this podcast, our audio engineer, David Wainwright, and our podcast creator, Bob Mixter. Thanks to you, one and all. And everyone out there, if you're new to the MotorWeek family, well, you can find out a lot more about us by going to our website at motorweek.org. You can also watch us on all of your public TV stations, or at least almost all of them across the country. You go on to motorweek.org, up in the right-hand corner, pull down about the show, put in your zip code. You'll get up-to-date time and station information. Or if you're over on cable, look for us on MAV TV, and you can go to mavtv.com for their schedule. You can also watch just about anything we've done over the last 10 years at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/MotorWeek, including our holiday-focused retro reviews that Ben Davis.
We've got a lot of those coming up. Obviously, fall is in the air, and so will be some retro review marathons.
Everybody likes to stream. You can stream us if you're a Prime member at Amazon over at PBS Living, or you can do it for absolutely no cost at pbs.org/MotorWeek, where you'll always be able to stream our latest episodes.
Or the PBS video app, which is available on your phone, your tablet, and your smart TV, so you can still watch MotorWeek on your TV, even if you don't have
got
cable.
a screen, you can watch MotorWeek, right?
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, and thank you out there for being a part of MotorWeek.
You've been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Lucas Oil, TireRack.com, and RockAuto.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series, each week on your local PBS station.